Welcome to Athar's Garage. In this video, I'll be working on the Racing GTR Step 8, or the second half of page 11 and page 12. So let's get started. So the second half of page 11 is to build the diff, and then page 12 is to install the diff onto the rear pod. So for now, let's focus on building the diff. So we're going to need the diff bag and some Kyosho ball diff grease. This is part number 96510. Everything is nicely packaged. Be careful when you open up these smaller bags because there are very small hardware in there. So let's get everything out and laid out. Be careful opening up this bag because the balls are in here. The way they have everything shown, we're not going to need this part right now. Let's get these parts off the parts tree. These are parts F1 and F2. In the manual, it says parts E1 and E2. So just take note of that. This might be an updated version. Trim these parts if needed. Okay, so have this piece. Looks like they gave an extra C-clip. So we have part E10, we have our rubber O-ring, we have E2, which is the shaft itself. Then we have E1-2, or in my case, I think it's F1-2. We have one of the plates, the pressure plates for the ball diff. We have the spur gear, we have our balls, another plate for the diff, part E1-1 or F1-1. Then we have D23, which is our ball bearing. And then we have E6, which is our E-clip. So first things first, I'm going to go ahead and put this O-ring on, and then I'm going to thread on E10, and I'm just going to leave it kind of loose for now. Actually, if you have a PN car stand, this would be great to build it. So next, I'm going to install part E1-2, and this is directional. So you have this side, and you have this side. So you want to face this side that has this flat towards the pressure plate. So I'm going to line up the pin just like so. So I lined up the pin and dropped it right on. Now there is a flat on here, so you want to line up the flat on this plastic piece, E1-2, with the flat on the plate, so it sits nice and flush on there, just like so. Now we can put the balls in the spur gear, but before we do that, we're gonna put some grease on there. So what I like to do is I actually like to throw the balls in the grease rather than putting grease on the balls, it actually does make a difference. All right, so I should have 10 balls. So I'm just going to go ahead and throw them in here. What I like to do is make sure that the balls are, submerged in the grease before I take them out. So the next thing we can do, since we're using the stand, is place the spur gear on top. And what we're going to do is we're going to face this lip right here down in this orientation. So the lip is going to be facing the long side of the shaft. And now we can go ahead and grab the balls from our grease and install them. It looks like it came with one extra ball, which is nice to have just in case you lose one. So I'm just going to leave it in here as a spare in case I need it later on. Now what I'm going to do now is just take a microfiber towel and just make sure that there's no grease on the outer section of the spur. That's good enough. So next we're going to install the other pressure plate. Just going to drop that on there. And this pressure plate also has a flat on it. So when you install part E1-1, this is the outside, and this side is going to face the pressure plate. Make sure you take note where that flat is so you can install it in the correct orientation. It's sitting nice and flush. So the next thing we can do is install the ball bearing. And I'm actually going to back off this adjuster on this side and push the whole assembly down a little bit to give myself a little bit more room for where the C-clip is going to install right here. So okay, there we go. And now I'm just going to tighten the adjuster so you take up some of the slop. Okay, so I'm not going to be able to adjust the ball diff with it out of the car. I'm going to have to put it in the car, make some adjustments, run it to see how it all works. So that's it for the assembly of the ball diff. So we can move on to page 12 now, which is going to be installing this onto the chassis. So we have a rear pod, we have E9, the M3x3 grub screw, which I'm not sure if that's the right grub screw that we need. This is the M3x3 grub screw that came in the kit. We're going to need M1.6x4 TM screws. We're going to need part A6-2, which is this piece and this piece. And we're also going to need D23 bearings. So I'm not going to use the kit bearings. I'm going to use the bearings I bought from HoustonRC. These are the ceramic bearings, so I'm going to install these instead. So let's go ahead and get part A6-2 off the parts tree, trimmed if needed, and installed onto the rear motor pod. Let's go ahead and get these bearings opened up. Only need 2 bearings for this step. So I'm going to leave the other 2 for the front axles. Right, fit nicely. So it doesn't look like these are directional. The bearing sits right in the center on both of them. I know they make an optional part that gives you, like, I think 3 different sets that are machined aluminum and anodized, but I'm gonna go ahead and use these for now. So let's get 4 M1.6 by 4 TM screws. And so we're gonna install these bearing holders on both sides. We're gonna install in these 2 holes here and these 2 holes here, and you want to face the bearings facing outside, so that way it's easier for you to maintain your bearings if you need to. All right, so the bearing holders are installed. So now we can install the rear diff. So we're just going to install it from this side here. And make sure everything moves nice and free. And it does. So the rear diff is in, and we're going to install part E9. You're going to make sure that the portion that installs to the wheel right here is going to face outside. We want to line up the flat on the shaft with the hole in part E9. And then we're going to take our M3 by 3 grub screw and install it. The screw that was in the diff bag doesn't seem to be long enough. And when you install this, you want to make sure that there's about 1 millimeter of side-to-side play. Otherwise, when everything heats up when you run, you can cause the bearings to start binding up. So I'm happy with that much side-to-side play. Okay. So there we go, that's the rear pod. So that's step 8, or page 11, and the second half of page 11 and page 12. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe if you did. Let me know if you have any issues, and I'll do my best to help you out. So this is where the rear pod is now. The next step is to install this onto the chassis, so stay tuned for that video. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.